1, 2, 3.
Casserole.
There we go. Nailed it. Okay. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Make Me, the podcast where Julia and I make each other do things that we couldn't, or shouldn't be bothered to do ourselves. It's a me, Jordan.
And it is I, Julia.
You guys, it's episode 10.
Episode 10 extravaganza.
Palooza celebration, Extreme X.
XXX. Wait.
Ezito X.
Yo, the Ezito X. I made a burrito today, not using the Ezito, and I was like, damn, I really wish I had this.
Yeah.
Fell out the back, so.
Whatever happened with that shark? Did you guys make the real agreement?
He hasn't called me back.
What a bitch.
I keep texting him, and he's like, oh, I'll call you back tonight, and then never does.
Here's my fun fact about Mark Cuban, he grew up in Pittsburgh and went to University of Pittsburgh for like a year.
Wow. Then where'd he go after that year?
Millionaires Row.
Oh, here's my fun fact about Mark Cuban. Every time I say his name, I want to say Marco Rubio. I'm like one step away from saying Marco Rubio every time.
I love that. Okay, you guys, it's a very special episode. If you listened to episode 9, you would know we're doing things a little different, and we gave each other the same Make Me, and that Make Me was to redo episode 1, the lost episode.
The lost episode. Some of you have heard it. Most of you probably haven't. That's fine.
And that's good. That's the way we prefer it.
Good.
In celebration, and it's a little bit later than our regular recording time, we made some drinkies.
Ooh, yeah. What'd you make?
I did my derivative of the Make Me Mojito, and I made a vodka and Pan Pellegrino. San Pellegrino. I've had a few sips of this.
I got a gin and tonic with a lemon because I ran out of lime. Unconventional. And then I threw in some rosemary simple syrup.
Okay, you guys. So with a little bit of a new structure, this is how we're going to do the episode. We're pulling back the curtain on what it was like for us to make a podcast. We are so excited that we got to 10 episodes. 2 years ago, we didn't think we'd get to 1. So the fact that we've persisted every week and produced 10 episodes, even though there's only 9 up, there is another one that we produced. But so we're going to take a deep dive into what it was like to what podcasting means to us and what it's been like to make the podcast. To start off, I'm going to go into a brief history of what podcasting even is, true to our podcast structure.
Cool.
Here's what I found about the origins of podcasting. The structure and the kind of idea of what a podcast is has been around since the 1980s, but it wasn't called podcasting. It was called audio blogging.
Whoa, wait, we had blogs in the 80s?
I didn't look necessarily, this is a brief history. I didn't really look necessarily into like what it looked like and how it was on, but it was like the same thing. And I think that we had computers in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure they were just like audio files of like people talking about things that interested them.
Right.
You know?
So like it's like a confessional booth with you and your friend, and you record it on a tape and then give that tape to your friend.
Yes, exactly. I had a professor in college say that he and his friend were sending tapes that they recorded on back and forth to each other in like a conversation kind of thing.
Like
I think that was like no, just like intellectual ideas. He was like a psych professor who taught like a storytelling class, which honestly I loved it.
That sounds like a really tedious conversation though. Like, hey, and then you have to wait 3 weeks to get a tape back that says, hey, what's up?
I think it was more like, here are all my thoughts as I'm having them. And now you listen and then you give me all your thoughts as I'm having them, you know?
Wow.
But then podcasting as we know it was developed in 2004 by ex-MTV video jockey Adam Curry and software developer David Weiner.
Okay.
Adam Curry developed a program called iPodder that automatically took information from the internet and put it directly on his iPod.
Okay.
So it's like what it's happening. Like it's very similar to what's happening now, where there's a stream on the internet and it's directly on our devices, which I mean, it's everything now, but I think back then was a little bit different. Curry now hosts the Daily Source Code, which is a very popular podcast. Here are a couple things I didn't know about podcasts. One is that there are no FCC regulations around podcasting. You can do whatever the fuck you want on podcasts.
It's like HBO.
Exactly. And another thing, a fun thing I found about podcasts is that between 2005 and 2007, George Bush became the first president to release his addresses to the public as a podcast.
Wow. That's like
George
right
Bush,
up there.
George Bush is the very first podcasting president.
That's like right up with the fireside chats. Like that's
that's true. That's true. I feel like we should be talking about it more because what was the first televised debate? That was Nixon versus Kennedy, right? Yeah. And then we got that, and then we get fireside chats before that.
That was right? FDR. And then we should all be knowing about George Bush, the podcasting president. Here's the thing. It just sounds so ridiculous. I think the reason why we don't know about that, or like it's not a big deal, is because podcast feels like one of those like aloof things in history that's going to be like a blip on the scale of all of history, and we're just going to be like, that was weird that we all did that for 20 years.
Remember when everyone thought that we wanted to hear their conversations?
Yeah. Remember when people thought the president should be heard all the time?
at people's beck and call. I mean, now we have a president who does that anyway on Twitter.
Right. That's what I'm saying. He sucks.
My last tiny fact about podcasts is that there are more than 115,000 English language podcasts in the world, and we're just one of those.
And then imagine the ones that aren't in the English language as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God.
What about the ones that, like, one of the first podcasts I ever listened to was a learning Spanish podcast, and half of it was in English and half of it was in Spanish.
So that only counts as 0.5 of a podcast. And
okay. That's true. But that's what I have about the history of podcasting. But what I'm curious about, Julia, is like what your history of podcasts was.
My history?
Yeah.
So I was trying to think about this, and I can't remember a time where like there wasn't podcast one day and then the next day there was, and it was like a big deal and I like seeked it out. I don't remember I mean, obviously I remember living in a time without podcasts, but it wasn't like a big deal. It just kind of like slowly people started adopting it.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure the first podcast I ever listened to was a podcast called Jay and Silent Bob Get Old, which is Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes from Jay and Silent Bob.
Uh-huh.
And at the time I was obsessed with Kevin Smith movies. I thought it was like very hip and cool and like edgy to like his movies, which turns out like a bunch of neckbeards like it too. So
aren't you a neckbeard though?
I mean, I could be. Look at my neck. There's no beard.
I feel like a neckbeard isn't necessarily a physical manifestation, but I feel like it's like a belief system.
Yes, but also I feel like I'm offended by that being called that, so I will not take on that title. Anyway, it was like an edgy podcast where like they said a lot of bad words and they like talked about Jason Mewes' sexual history, and I was like 14 being like, I don't think I'm supposed to be listening to this, and that's why I like it so much.
I feel like what I've learned about you is that you think a lot about things that you feel like you're not supposed to do.
Oh, yeah. For sure. I have a very, like, visceral memory of having my huge Skull Candy headphones, like bright pink Skull Candy headphones on, listening to a LimeWire download of Missy Elliott's Work It on full blast. So, like, anyone in the house could have heard it anyway. And my mom coming in, like, you know, feeling weird because it's a very sexual song. My mom coming in the room and me like flinging my headphones across the room and being like, what? Everything? Nothing? What? What'd you say?
Or everything would have been normal if you just sat there and listened to your song.
Right. Like, plus she had already heard it because it was full blast on like non-noise canceling headphones.
It's also like on the radio.
Yes. Anyway, I liked that podcast a lot. I listened to it for a while, but then you know, I kind of became more mature and was like, this is kind of dumb. They're just like saying outlandish things for the heck of it. I still like them, but I wouldn't listen to it.
Do you think you'd consider that the first podcast you listened to then?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. That's definitely, I think that's the first one. And it's the first one I listened for a long time period. And I can't remember if it was like the first one or not.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first one you listened to?
So the first one I tried to listen to was, do you know who Grace Helbig is? She was like a YouTuber. She still is, but she was like a quirky YouTuber that I liked in high school, and she came out the podcast. And in college, it was kind of hard to listen to podcasts because, like, in what space do you listen to podcasts? Right. Because, like, you're either around somebody or you're studying.
Right.
So I remember trying to listen to that one, but I just wasn't in the space to. But the first podcast that, like, really got me was with special guest Lauren special guest Lauren Lapkus. And ever since then, Lauren Lapkus has been like a really big part of like things that I find funny. And that was like she's the queen of podcasts, exactly. And that was about a year after college. And then the second one that I got really, really into, and these are the two that I like cycled back and forth between before I started like delving into other podcasts, is I one time Googled like scary stories to listen to. And it directed me to this podcast called The Black Tapes. And it's about like this, it's like a narrative fiction podcast about this like woman who meets this guy who like is debunking all these like these ghost stories, but then finds out some of them are real. But it's like set up in a way that like it's supposed to be like investigative journalism.
Yeah.
So that
sounds fun.
It is really good, and it's super scary. And I remember like I was working on my parents' house, like fixing it up one summer and like painting the outside of the garage, listening to it, and then like getting scared when like someone would be behind me because I'd be like so
broad
into
daylight.
the podcast. Yeah, exactly. But I think that if you look at my podcast listening history, you'll find that most podcasts are like a derivative of either of those. Yeah. It's either like improv comedy or conversation based, or it's like spooky narratives.
Ooh, I like that for you. It sounds like, did you ever listen to books on tape?
Yes, I love listening to books on tape.
Like when you were a kid?
Yeah, when I was in like middle school, our school was like a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
And we used to listen to a lot of books on tape and that.
That's what I feel like that podcast you were explaining is. Like, I feel like that's like a gateway to podcasts as well as books on tape.
I still listen to a lot of books on tape too.
Yeah.
It's just something to do while you listen. Or it is something to do while you listen. Do you think that you have like a list of top 5 podcasts either in the past and now? Oh yeah,
for sure. So like I said, the first one I ever listened to was Jay and Silent Bob Get Old, but around the same time, I don't know how I came across it. I found Pete Holmes' podcast, You Made It Weird, which is like comedy, but also like spirituality and life, whatever. And so I listened to that like from the beginning, and I still listen to it now. So I would say like that's my number one, even though it's like not the one that I like promote to other people. That's my number one.
Yeah.
Then I got Comedy Bang Bang.
Yeah.
I have Yo, Is This Racist? I'll say Las Culturistas and Why Won't You Date Me if I'm like just giving 5.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that I listen to like every week as soon as they come out.
Yeah. Agreed. I Comedy Bang Bang and Why Won't You Date Me are also on my top 5 lists. And then I also have Scam Goddess.
Nice.
And then I have My Favorite Murder, which we've talked about before on the podcast, but something about combining nostalgia of true crime with my mom and podcasting, and then these two very great women talking about mental health just like really like hits it home for me.
It's like
no matter what like the target demographic is, it's not me, but I'm like here for it.
It could be you.
It could be me. You're right. I think that with special guests, I think especially because it was like the first podcast that I listened to, I think will always be my number one, even though like it's not like continuing. And then I think that's more than 5, but I'm going to say anything that has PFT in it.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Paul F. Tompkins is like, right now it's Neighborhood Listen.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
It's
funny.
so good.
I feel like sometimes if I like run out of things in my listen now, I'll just type his name and see what other podcasts he's been on, and I'll listen to like some random podcast I've never heard of just because he's on it.
Yeah, but like that's limiting myself, and I've been working on also diversifying my feed. So if you guys are interested in more podcasts by a more diverse crew than what we might have said, go to our Instagram. We have a list of really great podcasts there.
Oh yeah. Plus, like, you know, we said 5. You and I listened to like 20.
Yeah, I cycle through like my regular, so Comedy Bang Bang, Scam Goddess, and Why Won't You Date Me are like weekly, and then I love finding like investigative journalism podcasts like that are like 10 episodes long. Before Tiger King was like a big deal, I listened to the Tiger King podcast, and it's like a 10 episode like deep dive into it. It's like the exact same thing.
Oh, I thought you meant like his radio show.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
You're like, I was a big Joe Exotic fan before the documentary.
I was actually supposed to be his third husband until that guy came in and
that guy
from me.
I feel very comfortable talking to you about podcasts, but most of the time when people ask like, what podcast are you listening to? Or like if you're in, I don't know, at work or whatever, and people ask about it, I feel really nervous to say what I listen to because everyone else is like, The Daily, Pod Save the People, like all these other new things. And like, you know, obviously very like way higher brow, probably way better for you to listen to. And all of mine are like jokey comedy that barely talk about anything important.
I feel the exact same thing. I one time got into a conversation with somebody at work, and I had to be like, I like the Happiness Lab.
Yeah.
Like I had to use my like galaxy brain to like figure out like intellectual podcasts. Because if I was like, yeah, I listen to Comedy Bang Bang, you usually listen to it, but be careful because sometimes they talk about Ninja Turtles a lot. Like I feel like they would have like just like stared at me, like stared through me.
So I feel like the one podcast that you can like cover both sides of the coin is Yo's is Racist, because they talk about current events and then they're also talking about like racism and social justice, but it's all like with the lens of them being funny and like being jerks the whole time and like not really giving real advice.
Yeah.
So you can like play the line a little bit and be like, oh, it's about racism, but also like what they talk about is like total bullshit the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that Joe Rogan was not on either of our lists.
I've literally never even tried to listen to a Joe Rogan podcast or the Joe Rogan podcast. What is it? The Joe Rogan Experience?
Yeah, whatever the hell it is. I feel like if it came out today that you listened to the Joe Rogan Experience and hadn't told me that you were gaslighting me for the whole time of our friendship.
I don't know if you knew this, but if you look up our podcast, the two, like there's like on the bottom, it says like podcasts you might like, Joe Rogan Experience and what's the one podcast with the two girls and it has the word daddy in it?
Oh, Call Her Daddy.
Call Her Daddy.
Yeah. I think that's because those are unfortunately the top listened to podcasts.
Yeah, that's wild.
Which means like America's brain is mush.
See, I feel like that's why our podcast has been so fun, is because we got to like combine our galaxy brain and our stupid Twitter Tumblr brain and put them together into something that like is more fun. But also, speaking of podcasts and our friendship, I feel like podcasts played a really big role in like the formative years of our friendship.
Yes.
For those who don't know, Julia and I became best friends at the last minute that we possibly could in college, and have only really communicated via like digitally, like via like phone and text and like FaceTime.
Yes.
So
for like, it's weird to have met someone in person that you could have been friends with for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then be like, okay, I'm never going to see you again because we live in different cities.
And we've only seen each other in person twice since 2016.
I can't believe it. Doesn't feel like that's true. How's it possible?
I have no idea. But the podcasts have been like a really good way for us very early on in that process to communicate, because we both love podcasts and we have like very similar like comedy sensibilities.
Yes. And also I feel like it gave us like a platform to talk we're still getting like to know each other a little bit after we graduated. So then we start like you and I were watching Comedy Bang Bang, the TV show at the same time. And then I think you weren't listening to the podcast. And I was like, if you love this TV show, come on the podcast. And then we just like had more things to talk about than, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely allowed us to have a lot of conversations, and then it turned into, hey, did you listen to this week's episode of Comedy Bang Bang?
Right.
This thing happened, and then it's either like, no, I need to watch it, or listen. I was like, yes, I listened, and like we're gonna riff now for 45 minutes about it.
Yes, and like we both love Paul F. Tompkins, so I'd be like, if you love that episode of Comedy Bang Bang, like listen to this other podcast he's on, and then we just like exploded our.
It would be amazing
friendship. And then when you came to visit me in Boston, we went to a Wild Horses show.
Oh my God, that was a highlight of like that summer. Amazing.
That was the best.
For those of you who don't know, Wild Horses is sometimes a podcast, but mostly a live show with Lauren Lapkus and crew. That was an amazing trip because that was a good time to make our boyfriends like fully deep dive into our like hobby with us, which I don't know about you, but sometimes I try not to like force my boyfriend into my hobbies because like I don't know if he'll like it, and I don't want it to be tainted for me, and
right.
I like my hobbies to be my hobbies, you know?
Right. But also it's nice to like share a little bit too. Yeah, it was like interesting also like our, you and I have like a friendship that's mostly online. I've never met your boyfriend, you've never met mine, and then we like made them hang out together. And like we had a loose connection and they had an even looser connection.
Yeah. It worked out so great though, and it was an amazing weekend.
Agreed.
But I think that's what I have on the history of podcasts.
I have a question based on history of podcast.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions for you. What podcast, it doesn't have to be from your list of like top 10. What podcast have you learned the most from, and what podcast killed the most of your brain cells?
Oh, okay. The podcast I'll answer the latter question first. The podcast that's killed the most of my brain cells is A Woman's Smile, and it's a podcast with it's Patty Harrison and another person, and I'm so sorry that I don't remember the other person's name, but I highly recommend going to listen to it. It's this very strange ephemeral podcast that has a structure and then goes into it's improv, and the sense of humor is just so like offbeat that sometimes you're like, what is happening? But I'm like laughing hysterically because it's like I can't tell what's going on, and it's all framed as this podcast where they're talking about womanhood. Right. And then it just like it starts that way and then goes into other stuff. I'm
imagining like the feminist bookstore segment of Portlandia as a podcast.
Oh yes, it's that. It's basically that, but it's even weirder, like a sense of humor. And then I think the podcast I've learned the most from I think it's the Black History Buff podcast. Yeah. I think that's one of the first podcasts that I've listened to that like is intentionally like informative. Yeah. And it's like the information is so rich that I think I've learned a lot from that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
I would say the podcast that I've learned the most from. So when I was starting my like ED recovery treatment, someone turned me onto this podcast called She's All Fat, which they talk about fat politics. I mean, they're like very fun, and they'll talk about like fashion and like the history of fat bodies and blah 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 blah. And I've learned so much from them, and it's like one of those podcasts that just feels very cozy. It's like feels like a sleepover.
Nice.
And then the podcast that I listen to that has killed the most of my brain cells is Doughboys. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of Doughboys.
They rate and review fast food or like chain restaurants.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to an episode where they're reviewing a restaurant and it makes you hungry for that restaurant, even as they're like this is the worst food. I would never like put this on my worst enemy. And then you're like, I gotta go to Olive Garden.
Yeah. Oh man. See, I can't consume like media that has to do with food because or unless I'm eating. Like I can't watch like the Food Network, and even if I'm just like eating Skittles and like they're making like a whole turkey dinner, yeah, I'm like, this is fine for me, but I need to be eating if like anyone's doing anything with food. Any other questions or comments before we move into a break?
Nope, that's all for me.
Okay, cool. Enjoy this little music. Hey, Julia.
Hey.
Can I tell you about 2 podcasts that I'm kind of loving right now?
I would love for you to do that.
Okay, cool. So with Corona, I run out of all like my typical podcasts. So I've been branching out, listening to different podcasts. Mm-hmm. The one is called the Black History Buff podcast.
Oh, I've heard of this, I think.
It's so good. He goes into all things, you know, Black history, whether it be U.S. history or all around the world, just like Black history. I really love the episodes when he goes into like African folklore, but then we'll also like the next week do things about like more contemporary things like the Little Rock Nine. I really recommend the Little Rock 9 episode. That was the first one that I had listened to. And then the next podcast is the Fig Widow podcast, which is actually produced by an Allegheny grad, Danny Janae.
Represent.
Yeah, every week she goes into what she's reading, poetry that she likes, and then we'll just like take a dive into like whatever topic that she has lined up. And she has like some local Pittsburgh guests, and they just kind of chat.
Dang, sounds like another big brain podcast.
It is a big brain podcast,
but super fun.
It'll be a good thing for everyone to listen to when they're like not listening to like our silly vapid one.
Yeah, highly recommend pairing our podcast with one of these 2 super smart podcasts so all of your brain cells don't completely diminish.
Yeah. All right, back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone.
How's everyone's break?
Are you ready for the extravaganza part 2?
Part 2, keep listening to us talk.
If you're keeping in line with us, we're 6 drinks in, so take 6 shots.
Take a shot every time that Julia and I interrupt each other. I'm plastered.
Take 1 shot for every episode we've done.
Oh. I think we should change the name of our podcast to Keep Listening to Us Talk.
That should be the name of every podcast.
Actually, I'm gonna start a side podcast where like I just interview people about what they do. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel good about that at all.
It already has higher ratings than this one.
What the fuck? I feel like if you get 1 good guest, like that's it. You've made it.
Yeah.
All right. Anywho, speaking of podcasts.
Oh yeah, we're on one.
Yeah, we're on one. Whoa. So this half, we want to talk about like how Make Me came to be.
This is the Make Me, y'all. We made a podcast.
We did it. This was our first Make a podcast because we needed to like force ourselves to do it.
Yeah. We held ourselves accountable.
Yes. So if my memory is correct, about 2 years ago, Jordan and I were saying we were having such a good time texting each other and FaceTiming, and we were like, damn, we're fucking funny. We love talking to each other. We love podcasts. We should have a podcast. And we kind of went buck wild, and we were like throwing out all these ideas of what it could be. And finally, we like started to make Google Docs about what the podcast was going to be.
What were some of our first ideas?
I remember a lot of our ideas were like ripoffs of other podcasts.
Yeah.
And I think I feel like one of the biggest ones was us saying we wanted the other person to watch something and then like give us a synopsis back and if we should watch it or not.
Yeah.
Because like we'd be like, have you seen this show? And the other person would say no. And then we'd have to like give a review.
Yeah. And then we realized that was how did this get made?
And
basically.
Every other movie podcast.
Right, exactly. I remember one distinctly, and I think this one is how I think this was the bridge into the actual podcast that we have now. But do you remember the podcast where every episode we were going to be a different kind of podcast?
Yes.
Because we couldn't figure out what kind of podcast we want to be. So we're like, well, one week will be a true crime podcast.
Yes.
And then another week will be like an improv comedy podcast.
Right. Which, how egotistical are we to think, like, we can't think of what podcast we'd be. So let's be all of them. Like, we're so good.
I still kind of love that idea, but I also think that we're doing it now.
I think
we already produced a true crime podcast one time.
True. I'm just saying, like, it's so funny that we were, like, dead set on having a podcast, even though we didn't have an idea for what it should be.
Well, we did that typical thing where we're like, oh, we're having such a good time talking to each other that clearly everyone would love like listening to us.
Yeah, which I'm sure everyone does, but it's not true for everyone. But anyway, our Make Me, in like basically the form it is now, like the premise, lived in Google Docs for like 2 years and we didn't touch it, and like every so often would be like, hey, remember that podcast idea? But we never had any like fire under our asses to do anything.
Yeah. I feel like I was in a weirder time in my life where I wasn't like in a spot to like sit down for like an hour every week to record a podcast. But yeah, our ideas lived in Google Docs for 2 years. And in those Google Docs, we had our original list of make me's, which I still use to this day. I think we both still use the list of make me's. And then like a script, I think is what we had.
Yeah, like a script for what the hell is this?
Right. Which I will say made it very helpful when we went to actually make the podcast, that we actually had like a starting point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is really nice.
So we actually started the podcast. So 2 years is happening. Sometimes we're talking about it, sometimes we're not. All of a sudden, pandemic hits, quarantine hits. And Jordan calls me up and says, hey, there's no better time than now to start a podcast, because what else are we doing? You're unemployed. I'm working from home. Let's do it.
Yeah. And that was at the beginning of quarantine when like we probably had like one more paycheck of real work, like, of like real job work. So we're like, well, we have the money. Let's just buy a mic.
Oh yeah, let's do it. $50, no problem.
And we bought a mic like, 2 days later.
Yeah, for more than $2.
But yeah, so we finally started the podcast, and it's been kind of a lot of fun. A lot of ups and downs.
Yeah. So I just like, I want to know, because I have like my idea of what this is, but what do you think? I guess like now that we're 10 episodes in, we're like somewhat established. We're way farther than we thought we would be. Mm-hmm. What has been like particularly like great about it? Like you're so glad this thing was exactly to plan and exactly in your brain. Yeah. And then on the other flip side too, like what's way harder than you were expecting?
I think that the thing that's been like the best has been like working with you. And that part I think went better than I expected. Yeah. Because, you know, going into like a group project, you kind of don't know what's going to happen and how much like work the other person's willing to put in.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think time and time again, we've both proven that like we're both willing to go above and beyond when it comes to the podcast.
Yes.
And like we're both willing to put a lot of work in, and that makes me feel really good.
I also feel like our lows, like our highs and lows are asynchronous. So like if there's a week where like I'm doing less work, then for some reason like you've been super motivated or whatever. I mean like in the off time, not when we're recording.
Yeah.
So that there's never like so much slack on the ground, and that's like totally happenstance.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's like the benefit of working with a friend, because you can be honest about it. Whereas like if you and I were only business partners, which who can say if we're even business partners at all right now?
Right.
The podcast of business. But if we only knew each other in that capacity, I might be like embarrassed to tell you I'm having a bad day, or like I just didn't get to it because I took a nap that was 3 hours instead of 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then in terms of like things that I guess weren't expected, is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, or like weren't that you didn't expect, or like was way harder than you were expecting.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is I didn't realize how much like, back to our highs and lows, like how much my emotional state can get in the way of producing the podcast.
Yeah.
And I guess I just didn't factor it into like that, you know what I mean? Even though there's like so much evidence where like if I'm at an emotional low, I can't produce a lot.
Right.
But there's been times where like we go to record and I'm just like, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
But I also said that I would record, so I'm recording now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then even like when it comes to editing and stuff, I always sometimes think like, oh, I'll just edit it and it'll be fine. But there's days where I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to fucking do that. I don't want to have to sit here and edit this. I don't feel good. I didn't feel good doing it then. So this isn't like necessarily like fun for me right now.
Yeah. What I hear from that is that the hardest part about doing this is being a person with fluctuating emotions.
Yeah. And also like as fun as this is, it is work.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a lot of work. And I knew that going in, but I also thought that like I would always be at a high because like this is like a hobby.
Yeah.
I
think that's what I would put as like what's harder than I ever expected was just that it is work and also fun. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just you and me working on this. We don't have a producer. We don't have like whatever. So we've had to figure out everything on the back end of like, how do you even stream something? How do you edit things? Like, how do we tag team all of these things? Because it should be a group effort. And I remember my dad texted me after we did like our 5th episode and he was like, how's the podcast going? Like, it must be a lot of work. What do you spend like 5-6 hours a week on it? And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's about right. But then also I was like, how did he know that? Because in my dumb brain, it was like, well, we just we record ourselves talking for 2 hours. That's exactly how we want it to be. We don't cut anything. We put it on YouTube, done.
Yeah. And everyone's going to love it.
Right. And we don't need editing because we're so great.
Yeah. Which is like another thing I guess we didn't expect. And let me know if this isn't true for you. Yeah. But like, I thought we would be able to just go on and just like start talking. But, right. 4, 5, 6 episodes in, you realize like, hey, maybe I shouldn't just be talking and I need to like, kind of perform almost.
Right.
Like, it's still me and it's still like my natural reactions, but sometimes you just have to be like, yell about it or something.
Right. You have to like turn it on a little bit.
Yeah. Every podcaster is turned on.
Oh yeah. Horny. Horny for the podcast.
Horny.
I think also like the preparation too. It's not just like I get to show up. And I was thinking about this for all the podcasts we listen to. There is work that happens before the podcast comes on, obviously. Yeah. Like they have to prepare notes to ask their guest or like whatever the story that is or the character they're doing that day. Like someone had to sit down for at least like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I couldn't just be like, I'm going to watch Beetleborgs and remember all of the things I have to say about it. Like I actually have to write shit down and like some sort of structure to what I'm going to say or else we're talking for 6 hours.
There are definitely episodes of the podcast. I'm flipping through my notes to see which one it is. But there's definitely been an episode of the podcast where I was like, I'll be able to just get on the podcast and talk about my experience. And then I go on and say the 3 things that I remember and then be like, I don't know what to do now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I can't even find one.
Are there any other, like, I don't know, things that you've like that have really excited you about producing all this?
Oh, I think this is I think that this hits all of like the things that you and I are good at. You know what I mean? Like the creativity part and the collaborative part and the trying new things part. And like Julia and I both like thrive on feedback. So like feedback between each other and getting feedback from other people and being able to like look at ourselves critically and trying to improve and like asking people to help us improve has been a lot of fun. And it's been like, there have been times where Julia and I are just like texting and I just like feel so good. And I'm always like, I'm just so happy that you and I have had this experience to be able to like, no matter what the outcome of this podcast is, to even like have had this experience, I think is going to be like important for future endeavors of mine.
Oh yeah, totally. And I also think like quarantine aside, just being able to like sit down and do a fun thing with you as friends, it feels so good. Like it feels so like enriching for our friendship to just be like, I did this wacky thing this week. Like, let me tell you about it.
Exactly. And then the other reason that we even started the podcast is because like, you know, we were having all these fun conversations over text message and stuff like that, but we're like, what if we made it more meaningful and like we learned things with each other?
Right.
And why don't we record them?
Right. And I was thinking like, you know, because of quarantine and the pandemic, I'm not seeing a lot of people, and like our conversations each week does give me that fulfillment of like human interaction, social interaction. But I think like it's way more beyond that, because I'm actually, I don't know this, I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't come off like rude sounding, but what I'm trying to say is like, I'm actually looking forward to this conversation, not just it's checking off my social aspect that I need that week. Yeah. Like I could be social with other people and it wouldn't feel as good as like I get to sit down with Jordan for like 2 hours and goof off.
Yeah. The 2 hours that you and I spend just on the recording work of the podcast, it's like, I feel like is the only time when I'm home in this room where I don't feel like I'm home in this room, if that makes sense. I feel like every day when I'm working, I'm just like painstakingly reminded that I can't leave. Yes. But recording this like completely takes that away.
Yes. And I think that's also because we've been like remote friends for so long that it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm talking to Jordan on the phone and I like wish we were in person. It's just like, this is actually better than what we've been doing, which is only texting.
Yeah.
So I have other questions for you.
Yeah, what's up?
So when we started Make Me, like when we started thinking about what Make Me was going to be, we were obviously not in quarantine. We had no idea that COVID-19 would be anything at all. And so we started making these lists of Make Me's for each other. And I was wondering if there's anything on your list that just like isn't feasible in the COVID-19 or post-COVID-19 world.
So in preparation for this question, I tried to find one that was specifically like that I can't give you because of COVID-19, but I realized that there wasn't one. Everything that like I had on my list was more of like a lifestyle thing than it was like a go out and do it thing.
Right.
But the one thing I realized that I can never give you now, otherwise, or in the past, was I had joined an MLM on my list. And I'm curious, if I had given you join an MLM, how would you have gone through with it? Like, like if money weren't an object, what would you have done?
So I've actually, this is funny. There's an MLM that is close to me in proximity, not close to my heart. Someone in my family is part of an MLM. Doesn't really like, they don't like, I'll just say this explicitly. My stepmother is part of doTERRA.
Oh, really?
Yes. And she's asked me, she's like, before, like we'll be eating breakfast or something, and she'll be like, you know, Julia, you'd be like a really good doTERRA person. I don't know the word. There's like some like creepy culty word for it, you know? Like
associate, advocate.
Associate, whatever. And I usually go like, haha, cool. And then like never bring it up again. But via her, I feel like I could just like easily play into I'm gonna do this and like let's see what happens.
I feel like you could have done everything except for give her a check. You know what I mean?
Right. Like I could even just like be like, oh, I'm interested in doing this. Yeah. Can I be part of like your next party or whatever?
Yeah.
Or like, can you show me what you're doing?
Can you remind me what doTERRA sells?
Essential oils.
Is there one that you can't give me now?
So I feel like this one could still happen, but I would never bestow this upon you in the COVID world, which was spark a conversation with someone in line.
That's my biggest fear. I hate that. I'm so happy that we're not doing that one ever, right, Julia? We're never doing that.
Yes, never, ever doing that. I had ones that were like just stuff like, oh, like join this certain group, which like those groups aren't meeting in person.
Yeah.
And like, like LARPing or whatever. Like, when are you gonna LARP? And then if you feel comfortable sharing, is there one on your list that like you want to keep on your list, but it's truly just weird and you want to like
Oh, for you?
Yeah, are there any like outlandish ones that you like can't wait to do or like just want to share because it makes you laugh?
Yeah, there's two that I want to share because I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote them down. One just says Boss Baby, and I don't know what my intention that is. It's one of my favorite movies, but I don't know what I meant by that. And then the other
one of your favorite movies?
I don't want to talk about it right now. You can make me talk about it later. And then the other one that I really, really love and I want to bring up one day is a tan hat.
So I have a very similar one for you that I don't know how this is a make me at all, but it's long sleeves under a short sleeve shirt.
Okay. I love that. Okay. Can I tell you what I would do if you gave that one to me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I would Google that and then I would look into all the celebrities who've ever done it and do a short bio on all of them.
Oh, bio?
Just short bio, like who they are. And I'd bring up the picture and we would talk about the picture.
So any other like reviews of the podcast before we get to a final rating? Any like thing that's gone great, it's gone bad, just like general thoughts about the podcast?
I'm kind of curious about like your experiences with the Make Me's.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering which one was the easiest for you to do and then which one was the hardest for you to do.
This is a really good question because I felt like all of them, I feel like my initial interpretation of them is always wrong. Like I'll think like this is gonna be easy and then it's hard, or like this is gonna be hard and then it's easy. And I'll say like the easiest, meaning like I had the most fun with it and like it was easy for me to actually like do the work and like I did it preemptively and I like had a really great time, was the Molasses Flood like true crime one.
Yeah, that one was good.
I was like so into it. I was learning all this stuff. Like it took every inch of my willpower not to spill the beans, so to speak, to Gary all week to be like, I'm gonna talk about this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
I love that one. It was so fun. And then we talked about this when we were recording, but the hardest one for me was doing the beauty guru video.
Yeah.
And I think that it just like, maybe I was being extra sensitive that week, but it also just like hit all these different things in my self-image that I didn't think it would, because as soon as you said like makeup tutorial, I was like, sick. I love them. They're so fun. And then I started to do them and I was like, ow, this hurts. Ow, I hate this. Ow, I'm really bad at this. Ow, ow. And I was like, what's wrong? Like, this is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
And ultimately I did have a lot of fun and it just like challenged me a lot and made me think more about myself and like my self-image and my self-worth more than I was expecting it to. And I think that's what was hard about it. Not that like technical difficulties or whatever.
Yeah.
What about you?
So for me, the easiest one was life hacks, because on two fronts. One, it was easy because I did it day of.
Yeah.
I did like almost the entire, like except for the research, but I did like the video all day of. And that one was that one was the easiest because it was so fun. Like go watch, like if you haven't watched the video, go watch it.
Fun.
I was having just like the best time just like walking around my boyfriend's house, like doing dumb shit to all of his shit. Like I was just like throwing like toothpaste in his sink and like cracking an egg. And it's like,
he's like out of tape.
He was like actively trying to clean. And like, I had like the bedroom scene I had to film twice because I went into the bedroom and I left and then he'd made the bed and everything was like not where I put it. I was like, okay, well, I do it all again. He's like, I'm sorry. It's like, no, I'm sorry that I'm like getting into your clean bed that you just made. But that one was so fun. And editing it was like, I was like laughing at myself.
Yeah, that's so fun. Someone DM'd us asking us about Make Me's and like future Make Me's. And they said, you know, this Make Me for Jordan might actually be a Make Me for Nathan. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that the procedure of us having this podcast is going to have collateral damage for our partners 90% of the time.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Our partners are going to be collateral damage to our Make Me's.
Oh, yes. Especially Nathan and I are moving in together this month. So it's going to be like his life is about to be like 45% more Make Me, because I don't think he realizes like how much time like in a Make Me that I'm just like either on a like I'm actively working on the Make Me like research wise, or like I'm doing the Make Me, you know? And like that requires like me to like be active in a space.
Yes. And I don't know, like, bless Gary's heart for, I mean, that sounds rude. I was going to say it's very delightful that Gary listens to all the podcast episodes and he's like excited to listen to them and will like quote us back to me, which is really fun. I
love that.
But he also has to hear me prepping for it. And like right now, I'm sure he can hear me talking through this door about him. Like,
yeah,
he hears everything we do in multiple iterations.
Yeah. But I think that the hardest episode for me to prepare for, or the hardest Make Me, was Rube Goldberg, because that's okay. The Rube Goldberg was just like way harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I should have been like, I should have known how hard it was going to be. But then also on the other hand, that was my first Make Me, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to like do something good.
Right.
And like make it, because I feel like I donked and I didn't do a good job because like I didn't finish it. You know what I mean? Like it didn't work. So I had to like then put pressure on myself to then like make it something that I put this work into it. So I might as well get something out of it.
Right.
So I had to spin it in a way that was entertaining for people to like watch, because I didn't also want to have tried it and then had to take a completely different approach.
Right.
And have lost all that work.
Yeah.
And I was just like like the beginning of like the making the podcast like was really nerve-wracking, because I was like, this is the first time that I'm actually electively putting something out there.
Right.
And expecting people to like want to listen to it.
Oh yeah. I think also you and I have this personality trait which led us to this podcast for a reason, is that we don't like doing things that we're not good at.
Oh my God, yes. 100%.
So that's why we're doing all this new stuff, like forcing each other to do things. Like I have this list of stuff. I'm like, that sounds cool, but I would never do it because I know I'm going to donk on it.
Yeah.
Is that the correct term of donk?
I don't know. I think I made it up last episode. So it's just now, if we do bad on a Make Me, we donk it.
Donked it. And you can donk on things too.
You can donk on things, but it's not the same thing as dunking on things. Because if you dunk on something, like you crushed it. But if you donk on something, you failed. It's
like you set up to crush them and then you flubbed right at the end.
Yeah, you donked.
You donked. Yourself.
But yeah, overall though, I think that that was the third layer of the podcast, which was getting out of our own comfort zone and trying things that we've always like wanted to try.
Right. So we kind of have to get past ourselves. Like, I know it was hard for the first episode, obviously, but I feel like we're learning every episode that it doesn't have to be that, hey, I tried this new thing and I'm awesome at it, and now I'm going to become famous for this thing.
Yeah. It's more like, hey, we tried it. So if you want to try it, think about it this way.
Right.
Here's a starting point.
Here's what happens when a beginner tries to do this thing that professionals do for money.
Yeah, which is what this entire podcast is.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say before we get into ratings?
Let's rate this motherfucker.
All right. So I'm going to say out of 10, I was going to say out of 10 donks, but a donk is a bad thing. So you don't want 10 of them.
Yeah, but I feel like you can, I think that if you say 10 donks and 10 donks being the highest, I still think that like, that's good. Like the donk is just like a star. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Okay,
a star isn't inherently good. A star is just like the measure in which good is measured on.
Right. True that. So out of 10 donks, what's your like overall rating of the podcast? Thinking about everything we've just talked about, like your whole history of podcasts, our history of making this and how it's been like a 2.5-year long process, all of the like highs and lows we felt in the past 10 episodes. How many donks do you rate Make Me?
I give Make Me 11 donks.
Hell yeah.
Out of 10. Just because like we're doing it. And that's not something that we could have told ourselves 2 years ago.
Right.
That we like are doing it. And then we've been doing it for 10 whole episodes. That's 10 weeks, and it's been longer than 10 weeks, but that's just the closest measure that we can have right now.
Right.
I can't remember the last time I did a hobby for 10 weeks.
Right. 10 weeks straight too.
And the fire has been fueled.
Yes. So I'm going to double down on your 11 donk rating. And I'll also give it an 11 donks. Because
Damn.
I'm just like having a effing good time.
Yeah.
And I feel like, people ask me about how's it going? And all I can ever say is like, I'm having the best time doing it.
Yeah.
They'll be like, that's so much work. And I'm like, yeah, but it's fun work. Like
literally every second is fun.
It's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's hard work, but like, it's hard work that I want to sit down and do. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is the first podcast that's ever been rated 22 donks.
22 donks. We need like a donkey sound. Like,
yeah. Oh my God, we do need a donkey sound. We need a donkey sting.
We can play.
We honk.
Just like, I'll buy a donkey and put it in my backyard and like slap its ass when we need it to make that sound.
Okay, I love that. Oh my God. So if we do bad, we have to kick the donkey.
Yeah. Wait, I don't want to kick it.
Okay, we have to ethically we schnaw the donkey.
Yeah, we gotta donk the donkey.
We gotta donk on the donkey. Okay, you guys.
Worst part of the episode has come. The end. And I'm gonna hand it to you to like give an update on what's gonna be happening after this episode.
Yeah.
Don't freak out. Nothing
Everything's
bad.
Okay. Make Me exists still.
Just so you know, everything's okay, but there's been an accident.
So, as you can tell, and as you've heard, a lot of work goes into making a podcast, and it's not just a podcast. It's, managing social media, and there's a lot of things that happen behind stage that, might not be as obvious when you're getting an update every week about what's going on. So we decided that we're going to take a 2-week break for putting out podcasts. Now, in that 2 weeks, Julia and I are going to continue working.
Yes.
We also both have a couple things going on in our lives, a lot of moving parts. So we think that for right now, for 2 weeks, we're gonna focus on that and give you guys a break from listening to us. And I think that you guys should definitely look at that list of podcasts that we have up on our Instagram and check a ton of those out.
Yes.
They're great podcasts. But we all need a break every once in a while.
Yeah, we need a break. You guys need a break. There's plenty of podcasts out there, as Jordan reported at the beginning of this episode, over like 200,000 or more. Listen to someone else, and distance makes a heart grow fonder. So we will see you in 2 weeks.
But before we wrap up, obviously in 2 weeks we're gonna need Make Me's. So Julia, what's your Make Me for our next episode?
I'm making you make a vision board.
Ooh, I'm gonna manifest some shit into my life.
Oprah style.
You don't even know what's up. Okay, Julia, I want you to make me a playlist.
Ooh.
And you could pick whatever theme it is and however long it is, but I want it to like be around a theme or event or something. Like I want it to be a purposeful playlist.
Not just like summer 2012.
It can be summer 2012, but I want there to be like a vibe to it. You know what I mean? Like what if it is summer 2012? What does that look like? Where are we? What are we
summer
doing?
2012.
There we go.
Got it.
That's the vibe.
I'm on it. I love it.
And then before we wrap up, I have a listener Make Me.
Hit us with it.
So I want our listeners to promote our podcast MLM style. Ooh. I want you to tell your 3 closest friends to tell their 3 closest friends that tells their 3 closest friends. We want you to create girl boss teams, and I need you to get on Instagram Live, and I need you to get everyone on, and I need you to promote the shit out of this podcast.
I need you to post cryptic Facebook posts that goad people into DMing you to learn more about the product, and that product is Make Me.
You guys, it's just lateral marketing. It's fine.
And you can lie to them and say you'll get certain amount of whatever cut that isn't there.
Also, rate, comment, subscribe.
Right? Comment, subscribe, email us, DM us, tag us in stories, send us weird pictures. Do it all, baby.
A side quest, do one of our Make Me's and tell us how it goes.
Oh, yeah. You have 2 weeks.
Yeah. And if you donk, it's fine. We'll pick you back up.
And we'll post you on our Instagram at all.
If you want us to.
Right. And if you don't, why are you sending it to us?
All right. Well, until episode 11, we'll see you later.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, it's Jordan and Julia. Thanks for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it.
For content related to this episode, follow us at Make Me Pod on Instagram. And you can hear episodes each week on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you find us anywhere else, please let us know.
You can also send us your questions, comments, Make Me suggestions, pictures of your dog, or requests for unlicensed medical advice to makemepod@gmail.com.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, rate, etc., etc. That's how we get discovered.
Please, we need to be clicked.
But for real, leave a comment so we know you love us.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.